MLB is facing some backlash after moving the All-Star game out of Atlanta in response to the state's new voting law.
Is the White House concerned that Major League Baseball is moving their All-Star game to Colorado, where voting regulations are very similar to Georgia?
Well, let me just refute the first point you made. First, let me say on Colorado, Colorado allows you to register on Election Day. Colorado has voting by mail, where they send to 100% of people in the state who are eligible applications to vote by mail. 94% of people in Colorado voted by mail in the 2020 election. And they also allow for a range of materials to provide, even if they vote on Election Day, for the limited number of people who vote on Election Day. I think it's important to remember the context here. The Georgia legislation is built on a lie. There was no widespread fraud in the 2020 election. Georgia's top Republican election officials have acknowledged that repeatedly in interviews. And what there was, however, was record-setting turnout, especially by voters of color. So instead, what we're seeing here is for politicians who didn't like the outcome, they're not changing their policies to win more votes. They're changing the rules to exclude more voters. And we certainly see the circumstances as different. But ultimately, sorry, let me add one more thing. It's up to Major League Baseball to determine where they're holding their All-Star game.
Yesterday, the press secretary was asked, did President Biden call for this? And she said, no, he didn't call for this. In fact, let me give you some context by reading one of his quotes. And she proceeds to read where he says, I am very supportive of the idea of a boycott, which just underscored the point that he is calling for this. And in that same soundbite, he said this was Jim Crow on steroids to ESPN, and even MLB on their website cites the fact that Biden disagreed with this law. So he absolutely had a part in this. And then over at the State Department, you have their spokesperson saying, we won't give advice to companies as to what to do on China. But MLB, Georgia, that's fair game. It's total mixed messaging, and they should be called out for this in the briefing this afternoon.
Is the president going to change the way that he talks about the new Georgia voting law? Because in that interview that you referenced, he said the law would end voting at 5 o'clock when working people are just getting off, and he said it would end voting hours early so working people can't cast their vote after their shift is over. But the Washington Post gave that claim 4 Pinocchios because that part of the law gives counties the option to extend voting hours. And so I'm just curious if the president is going to change the way that he's talking.
Well, fundamentally, the president doesn't believe it should be made harder to vote. He believes it should be easier. And this bill makes it harder to request and return an absentee ballot. It collapses the length of Georgia's runoff election, making it harder for large jurisdictions to offer early voting. It imposes rigid new restrictions on local officials' ability to set polling hours to suit the needs of voters in their county. Those are all pieces of the bill. So his view is that we need to make it easier and not harder to vote, and that will continue to be what he advocates for.
But the thing he said has been determined by election law experts to be not true. So I'm just curious if he's going to stop saying that.
Well, again, I think we can, the fact checkers will also tell you that this bill does not make it easier for people across the state of Georgia to vote, and that's where he has concern.
Before the president said that he would strongly support moving the All-Star game out of Georgia, did he consider the economic impact? Because the Cobb County tourism CEO is saying they're going to lose $100 million in lost business activity, 8,000 hotel rooms. Did he think about that before he said he would strongly support the move?
Again, he was doing an interview. He was given the context, as I just read out to you in full detail of how the question was asked. He answered the question.
On the baseball All-Star game, I know that you made the point that he did not dictate the league move the All-Star game out of Georgia, but he likes to say the words of a president matter. He said he would strongly support if players in the league wanted to do that, and they did it. So does he think that the PGA should move the Masters tournament that begins this week out of Georgia?
I'm not here to call for anyone on behalf of the president or the vice president or anyone to take steps in reaction to the law in Georgia. The president was asked a direct question, and the context of the question was also around the league meeting to discuss this exact issue, and he answered the question.
So then should we believe that if PGA Tour players who are arriving in Augusta this week or today to register for the tournament, if they got together and decided or talked about not participating, that is something he would strongly support? Or is there a difference between...
I'm sure you will ask me that question or him this question, but our focus is on doing what we can to advocate for making voting easier and more accessible around the country. And that's where our efforts are going to be from the White House.